Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
A bunch of people tipped me off to a story involving Carvana and Florida, but Carvana is having troubles in a bunch of different states, and Florida is just one of them. But this is the story that we're hearing over and over again now regarding Carvana and the current state of paperwork regarding vehicles that people purchase. So news4jax.com, J-A-X, news4jax.com, ran this story. The I-Team uncovers state action and federal lawsuit against Carvana. This is the second administrative complaint filed against the car company by the state of Florida. And I've mentioned before that in states, there is usually a department that oversees all kinds of things to do with cars, including the sale of cars. Because when you buy or sell a car in a given state, that state wants their sales tax. And if you register the car in that state, they will then charge you for a license plate and so on. So they track these things, and a lot of those transactions are done at one end by a car dealer if you buy a car from a car dealer. So you buy a brand new car or a used car from a car dealership, they usually prepare the paperwork, submit it to the state on your behalf, and then later on you get the mail back from the state saying, here's what you've got, registration and so on. So the key here is the car dealership doing its job properly? And some would suggest that recent problems with Carvana point to issues. The News4Jax I-Team has uncovered more complaints against Carvana involving people who purchased used cars from them. The state of Florida has filed a new administrative complaint against the company for taking too long to turn over titles to several different car buyers. Most states say that if you buy a car from a car dealer, that dealer's got so long to submit the paperwork to the state to get the title into your hands. And this is probably the most common complaint we've been hearing about during COVID regarding all car sales. And that is someone goes to a car dealership to buy a car, they get temporary plates, they start driving, and nothing ever happens with respect to the paperwork that went to the state. And the question is, was it ever sent to the state in the first place? Because if they send it to the state and the state drags their feet, then it's the state's fault. So the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles accuses the dealership of selling 8 cars to 8 different Florida customers between December of 2020 and March of 2021, and failing to turn over the title and registration to the buyers within 30 days, which is required by state law. This is the second administrative complaint filed against Carvana by the state of Florida, following a settlement in September with Carvana that resulted in $6,000 in fines related to complaints of a dozen customers. You might say, Steve, 8 customers, really? Well, you have to understand, not everyone complains to the state, and you have to have an official complaint for them to act on it. So state officials also told the News4Jax I-Team that based on other complaints and their own investigations, they have opened investigations of Carvana, which could result in additional administrative actions by the department. And what they mean by administrative actions is that you or I, if we get in trouble with the state, it's usually a criminal action, or you could be sued by the state, of course. But an administrative action is where you hold a license from the state. So car dealers are licensed by the state to sell cars within the state in which they're licensed. So in Michigan, new car dealers are called Class A dealers, and then Class B are used cars. And there's a whole bunch of different classes for brokers and people who deal in scrap, but it's the A and B dealers that most people deal with. And so they hold the license to sell those cars. And if they lose that license, it can be catastrophic for the business because you got to stop selling cars. And that's your one job. You don't want to stop doing it. So that's the threat here. Carvana is facing similar complaints over titles, registrations, and tags from customers in California, Texas, Michigan, North Carolina, and now Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, consumer law attorney Robert Coco has filed a federal lawsuit against the company. He said, we're not only suing on behalf of these 2 individuals, but seeking to have representation of a larger group of people that we believe exists, not only in this Commonwealth, but beyond it, east of the Mississippi. Those other individuals, which would number in the thousands, could number in the thousands, who have the same experience. In that class action lawsuit, it's alleged that one of the clients was given 6 temporary license tags over an 11-month period from various states, including Arizona and Tennessee, before the buyer received their title and registration. And that is a problem I've heard of, where someone gets the car, it's got a temporary tag on it, they drive off the lot with it, nothing ever shows up, they call the dealer and they go, I got a problem. My temporary tag, as you know, is temporary. It's expired. What do? They go, come on, we'll give you another one. And they'll go into a dealership in one state, be given a temporary tag from another state. I'm not saying it's what Carvana's done. I've just heard of that happening. But the point is, the temporary tags are temporary in that they do expire, but they're also designed to be replaced by permanent tags. So if you get several temporary tags in a row, it's an indication that something's wrong. Either the state is taking too long or the car dealer is taking too long. That's the question. With regard to those out-of-state temporary tags, the lawsuit goes on to say that Carvana concealed from the plaintiff that it was not authorized by either the states of Tennessee or Arizona to do so, and later alleges that Carvana's state law compliance policies and practices are such that it routinely issues multiple temporary license tags in violation of state laws governing the issuance of temporary license tags. Some people really find this to be a desperate circumstance, one which they never anticipated. It's such a common factor in any car purchase agreement, either new or used, that you have to register your vehicle, and it comes as a complete shock that somehow turns into an ordeal, the attorney says. The class action lawsuit alleges Carvana is a repeat offender and has engaged in a pattern and practice of fraud and deceit harming numerous consumers. It's the allegation in the class action lawsuit. As far as that administrative complaint from Florida, Carvana has several options for how it responds, ranging from a settlement to requesting a hearing where they can dispute the allegations. And of course, the I-team reached out to Carvana, reaching their spokesperson by phone or email, attempting to on Tuesday, but have not yet received a response thereto. So, Carvana, as you may have gathered, became a very big force in the used car business in recent years. And that's a good thing. I mean, if you can build a company up and make it a success in respect to sales numbers, that's really interesting. That's fascinating this day and age. But they've obviously, if nothing else, encountered growing pains. And that's when something grows so fast that the organization itself can't keep up. And if you've ever watched sales transactions take place at car dealerships, RV dealerships, or anything like that, and I've watched this happen many times, both as a consumer and as an attorney, you know that every car sale that usually, I'm going to give you an example that I'm familiar with here in Michigan. There's usually a deal folder. So you come into my dealership, Steve's Used Cars, and you agree to buy a car out on my lot. And we sit down, we create paperwork, and we both sign it. I sign it as the seller, you sign it as the buyer. And some of the documentation is for me, such as the bill of sale. Some of it's for the state, such as the application for title. And so we create all this paperwork. And then at the end of this transaction, as the smoke clears, you get the keys to the car, I get the money for the car or a promise to pay. And then I take this paperwork and send it off to the state, a bunch of it. But at the center of this is a thing called a deal folder. And I put all that information in the deal folder. And I keep that deal folder, and it's available for examination by the state for several years down the road. So every car dealership in Michigan has someplace on its premises filing cabinets filled with deal folders. Now, I know people are going to ask, Steve, why don't they digitize that? They might have digitized it by now. I don't know. But I can tell you that I've seen the deal folders, and it's just a folder, but it's usually got a pre-printed front on it with a bunch of stuff that's got to be on the front of the folder. The name of the buyer, the make, the model, the VIN of the car, and how much the car sold for, and blah, 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 blah. And then inside of it's all these documents. And the originals, unless they go to the state, are in there. It's a ton of paperwork. And now, some of the paperwork is easier to do now because they can do it with forms on computers. Think back when it was done with typewriters. There was some poor person at the dealership whose job it was to type these forms out on a typewriter. Nightmare. But there is a ton of paperwork for every car. And that ton of paperwork has got to be done properly. And then it also coincides with a thing called a police book. And so every dealership's got a police book which keeps track of every car in their inventory, including when they got it and when it leaves, where it went. And so all of this stuff has got to be done. It's got to be all tracked. And so if Carvana is selling cars in Michigan, for instance, they've got to do everything that Steve's Used Cars got to do, and every other B dealer in the state's got to do to sell used cars. And that means they've got to create all these paperwork, forms and so on, keep all this stuff available, and then also process the paperwork properly. And so when somebody came up with the idea of having a car dealership that was in essence operating in all 50 states, assuming they are, I don't know if they operate in Hawaii and Alaska, but assuming they operate in all these different states, they were going to have to learn how to do it in each state. Now, there are other national firms that have popped up with the internet. There's national real estate firms, for instance. And I know for a fact that in those cases, they will find a real estate agent in a particular state and say, we want you on board so you can assure that we do everything right according to your state. If they're going to operate in 50 states, they need 50 of them, one from each state. So what I think happened here was a perfect storm. I hate that saying, but two things happened. Carvana really hit their stride as the used car market exploded during COVID. But that coincided with all of the problems with staffing at the state level and everywhere else, such that anybody can send their paperwork to Lansing and it'll take a while to get processed. Couple that with the fact that you're a fairly young business, booming because of the situation, and now you're trying to keep on top of all your paperwork, you're trying to get it all off to Lansing or wherever you're going to send it, Tallahassee, and you're trying to get all this stuff done, and mistakes will get made. So then what happens? You get a bunch of angry customers who don't have license plates. They got temporary tags from different states on their car. How that happened? Not quite sure, but I suspect that mistakes may have been made. Allegedly. So I-Team uncovers state action federal lawsuit against Carvana from News4Jax, that's JAX.com. And Ben, Daryl, Eric, S, Michael, and Paul all sent it. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. The less stuff I own, the less my stuff owns me.